The Detroit Lions share the lead in what many consider as football's toughest division, the NFC's Central. Indeed, this year, Detroit fans have much to cheer about. The Lions sport a 5-1 record and once again have established themselves as one of the premier defensive teams in football. But today, they face their greatest test. Opponents are their companions in first place, the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings have sailed steadily through a brutal schedule. They have beaten the Kansas City Chiefs in their last 2 starts, have overrun Dallas and Los Angeles. Today's game should be a defensive classic. The Vikings are number 1 in overall defense. The Lions are best in rushing defense. While defense has long been a tradition in Detroit, this season the offense, too, has excelled. The Lions lead the NFC in scoring. One reason is that quarterback Bill Munson has been very good, and his receivers have matched him. But the big difference in the Lions' roar has been their running. Farr has so far escaped injury, and Altie Taylor, his running mate, has been superb. For the first time in years, Detroit presents a balanced attack on offense. If there's one dark note, it is some key injuries on defense. Certain to miss today's game are 2 vital members, Joe Robb and All-Pro Lem Barney. Barney's replacement, Bobby Williams, looms as one of the keys of today's game. The man who is most aware of this is Viking quarterback Gary Quazzo, who has finally emerged as number 1 after 7 years of relief in Baltimore and then Minnesota. He leads an attack that ranks 2nd only to Detroit's in the NFC. But the foundation of Viking football remains its great defensive platoon. They have allowed only 39 points so far this season. That's an average of just 6.5 points per game. So it's Bud Grant's brutal Minnesota Vikings and Joe Schmidt's hungry Detroit Lions. First place is the prize. I'm Jack Whitaker, and this is the NFL Game of the Week, Minnesota versus Detroit. This game was to be one of the bitterest struggles of the season, and from the opening kickoff, it was obvious to the sellout crowd at Tiger Stadium that both teams were highly keyed for the following 60 minutes. The Lions had first possession. It was a time to probe the mighty Viking defense. Joe Schmidt's plan was to pit strength against strength, the 3rd best rushing attack in the conference against the 3rd best defense against the rush. The Vikings won the first round. The Lions failed to get 10 yards. Bud Grant sometimes likes his quarterback to come out throwing to surprise his opponent. So Gary Quazzo looked, but was blindsided, fumbled, and the Lions' defense had given their offense an early break. First down on the Viking 40. Tackle Larry Hand was the man who caused the fumble. Unable to run on the last series, Munson went to the short pass, and number 24, Mel Farr, took it 22 yards to the 16. Two plays later, the Lions went into the lead as Munson found Earl McCullough all alone on a corner pattern. The Lions' defense had done what their opponents are so famous for, set up the short touchdown drive for its offense. Lions 7, Vikings nothing. The Vikings' second series would be much less disastrous. Quazzo, like his professor at Baltimore, doesn't like to leave his pocket, but can and does when necessary. However, Quazzo preferred to establish his ground attack through others, and Dave Osborne, number 41, had some success. Another part of the Viking plan was to mix Osborne's runs with passes from Quazzo to his great receiver Gene Washington, number 84, and this one was good for 35 yards. On a repeat of this 3rd down play, watch Quazzo's protection, and then watch as Washington's 6'4" height makes it easy for him to grab Quazzo's slightly underthrown pass. First down on the Lions' 22. From here, the Lions dug in, and Minnesota failed to move on 3 straight plays. So Fred Cox came in and kicked a field goal, and the Lions now led 7-3. One of the keys to the Vikings' success over the past few years has been the play of their special units. On the ensuing kickoff, the Vikings found they had a 12th man on their special unit, dressed in blue. It was this unknown accomplice that tripped up number 40, Nick Eddy. On the following play, however, the Vikings did the job themselves. It was cornerback Bobby Bryant, number 20, who timed Munson's sideline attempt perfectly and went in untouched. With 10 minutes gone in the first quarter, the best pass defense in the NFL had put the Vikings on top 10-7. We'll be right back with more exciting action on the NFL Game of the Week. The pattern of the game was now emerging. This would be a day in which defense would prevail. The Lions were unable to run at all on Marshall, Page, Larson, and number 81, Carl Eller, who was all over the field. Neither Mel Farr nor Altie Taylor could move on Eller and company, and would make but one first down by rushing the entire half, and only 3 for the game. The Lions' defense was keeping them in the game. The kicking teams were preventing good runbacks of kickoffs or punts, covering well, and their front line was to this point bottling up number 41, Dave Osborne. The Lions' defense was number 1 against the run in the NFC, and Quazzo would have to go primarily to the pass to beat them. From his own 20, he hit Washington on 3rd down to keep the drive going. Then Osborne went around right end for his first good gain of the day. Now at the 45, Quazzo again went for the long pass on 1st down, but overthrew receiver Bob Grimm. The Lions' defense continued to stifle Osborne and Clint Jones, number 26, and Dr. Quazzo, a practicing dentist, would have to return to the drill. But before he could, Alex Karras tried to pull some teeth of his own before the patient opened his mouth. This cost him 5. 3rd and 7. Quazzo went to the sidelines for John Henderson, but again was off target, and the Vikings offense had to give up the ball. The Lions offense then began their first legitimate sustained drive as the first quarter ended. But wary as he was of the Vikings' great defense, Munson went to a short passing game to later pick up a 1st down on 3rd and 3. Then he went long for the first time. Avoiding a blitz by number 59, Lonnie Warwick, Munson found Altie Taylor, and Taylor's great catch took it to the Vikings 16. The Vikings secondary, though, is well known for their stinginess not only against the pass, but against the sweep. Farr tried it. Shirachman stopped it for a -2. So on 3rd and 7 from the 13, Munson went up top again. Behind perfect protection, he fired for receiver Larry Walton. Walton made the grab to put the Lions back in the lead. On a replay of the score, watch the protection Munson received as he spotted Walton behind everyone. Walton's fine catch and a stutter step to stay in gave the Lions a 14-10 lead. But it was now the Vikings' turn, and Quazzo began this drive by faking to Osborne up the middle and keeping himself around left end for 15 to the 44. This drive would be spearheaded, however, by Quazzo's passing. True, Quazzo was not in the top 10 statistically, but due to their defense, the Vikings rarely have had to resort to much passing, since they rarely have to sustain long drives. But Quazzo has an excellent arm, and the big play of this drive was a bomb to Henderson, who was whistled down on the 6. On 1st and goal from the 6, Quazzo again overthrew his receiver. The kid who caught the ball, however, did the best down and out, up, over, and in move seen here in years. Quazzo then chose his own receiver, and the result was 6 points. Bill Brown was the man with the ball, and the Vikings again had the lead. On a repeat, watch the Lions' number 71, Alex Karras, get quickly by his man, but at age 35, Big Al just didn't have the speed to get Quazzo before he unloaded to Brown for the score. Vikings 17, Lions 14. The game was thus far living up to the pregame billing it well deserved. Both the Vikings and the Lions had come to play. With the Lions trailing by 3 midway through the second quarter, Munson could still afford to try and set up his passing with runs. But the Vikings' quickness is awesome, and safety Carl Kasulke came up to stop a third down play. Detroit had to punt again. Then, for the first time in the game, the Vikings moved consistently on the ground. With Dave Osborne and number 30 Bill Brown carving out 9s, 10s, and 14s, the Vikings drove to midfield behind the blocking of Yari, Sunday, Davis, Vallone, and Tingelhoff. Quazzo's passes would now be more effective, and he sidelined one to Henderson, who almost became the Headless Norseman on a necktie job by defender Bobby Williams. It was 3rd and 1 at the Lions' 42 and a big play. Dave Osborne went into the pile and came out with, you guessed it, 1st and 10 Vikings. Figuring history should repeat itself, even if it doesn't, Quazzo went for the bomb on 1st down. Washington and Williams ran neck and neck down the sidelines, and the taller of the two prevailed. Touchdown, Vikings. It was 24-14, as the Purple People Eaters now were chewing away at the King of Beasts. With less than 4 minutes left in the half, Munson was futilely still trying to run on Minnesota, but got nowhere. Again, they had to punt, and again, good coverage would pay off. Charlie West never saw who or what hit him, and the Lions' Bob Kowalkowski recovered and ran it in for what appeared to be a touchdown. But the officials blew it dead at the 10, where Kowalkowski had recovered. It was still a big break, and if the Lions could take it in, they would go into the locker room down by 3. On 1st down, Farr went to the 7. 2nd and 7. Munson's pass for Walton is almost, but not quite. 3rd and 7. Munson throws a safety valve to Farr. Watch number 22, Paul Krause, as he moves quickly across the field to help stop Farr 3 yards short of the goal. 4th and 3. Joe Schmidt refuses to gamble and goes for the sure three-pointer. Mann's field goal makes it 24-17. The Lions are still very much in the game. With 22 seconds left, the Lions tried an onside kick. It almost backfired. Oscar Reed scooped it up like an all-star shortstop, cut back through the middle, and went to the 45. With 11 seconds left, Quazzo had time for one play and a field goal attempt, and he found tight end John Beasley, number 87, over the middle to the Lions' 37. So Fred Cox came in to try to increase his conference scoring lead over Lion kicker Earl Mann, but his 45-yard attempt was wide left. The Tarzans of the North were in command of the King of Beasts as the half ended with the Vikings leading the Lions 24-17. We'll be right back with more exciting action on the NFL Game of the Week. With Minnesota leading 24-17, Detroit kicked off the second half to Clint Jones, who sped 30 yards up the left side of the field. The Lions are leaders in defensing the rush, allowing only an average of 85 running yards per game. Minnesota ran for 95 against them in the first half alone. But in the second half, Detroit shut off the Viking running game. So Gary Quazzo took to the air and threaded the needle to Beasley, despite blanket coverage by Mike Wigger. It was clear sailing for the big tight end until he was caught from behind by Bobby Williams. The pass covered 40 yards to the Detroit 6. In 3 tries on the ground, Minnesota couldn't move against the Lion defense. So Fred Cox, the conference scoring leader, kicked a 10-yard field goal to give Minnesota a 10-point lead and a little breathing room. (27-17). In the first half, Detroit hadn't been able to run against the Viking forward wall. Their 17 points were the result of Bill Munson's passing. In the new half, it quickly became apparent that if the Lions were to win it, it must be by the pass. So effective was the Viking defense, Detroit runners weren't able to get out of their own backfield. So Minnesota regained the ball, and then began an incredible and unlikely chain of events from 2 teams who pride themselves in seldom making mistakes. Gary Quazzo, attempting the quick strike, overthrew Bill Brown, and Dick LeBeau made the 52nd interception of his career, which tied him for 4th place in the all-time NFL rankings. Detroit had a break and the ball near midfield. Munson immediately tried to capitalize by throwing long for Walton, but Ed Shirachman intercepted on the 5 and returned 42 yards to the 47. Then Quazzo, on a rollout, threw to Grimm in front of Bobby Williams for 18 yards. But this was the only interruption in the string of interceptions. 4 on the next pass, when Quazzo overthrew Beasley. Mike Wigger was there to take it as the 3rd quarter ended. As the 4th quarter began, Munson made the comedy complete by throwing still another interception, the 4th in 5 consecutive pass plays. Roy Winston was the recipient of this one. Fred Cox booted a 36-yard field goal, his 3rd of the game and 17th of this young season. Lions 17, Vikings 30. The remainder of the afternoon, the game lived up to its advanced billing as a titanic defensive battle. But it was a battle the Vikings clearly won. Minnesota stayed strictly on the ground, and although they couldn't gain against the strong Detroit defense, Gary Quazzo didn't attempt another pass. But Bill Munson and the Lions, trailing by 13 points, had to pass, and everyone knew it. 58,210 Detroit fans knew it. Bud Grant and the Vikings knew it. But most of all, the 11 men of Minnesota's magnificent defense squad knew it. And the results were disastrous for the Lions. On every attempt, Bill Munson was forced to hesitate because of the close coverage by Minnesota's secondary, and on every attempt, Munson barely ditched the ball before hitting the ground. The only pass Munson completed was thrown up like a balloon because of the Viking rush, and receiver Charlie Brown was called for offensive pass interference on the play, negating the completion. Greg Landry replaced Munson, but the result was the same. Landry was buried by the Minnesota muscle. Landry did complete one pass, however. This was a 23-yarder to Charlie Sanders, who had been virtually ignored by Munson. But except for the pass to Sanders, Landry could only complete harmless outlet passes to his setbacks. The Vikings secondary and linebackers were covering too well for these to mean much. Time and again, the Detroit setbacks were met hard for no gain. Most of the time, Landry ran for his life. He's a good running quarterback, but it's not the way to make up a 13-point deficit. The Viking defense had prevailed. As a result of their victory today, the Vikings stand alone atop the Central Division of the National Conference. Their record is now 6 victories and 1 defeat. That lone setback was a 3-point loss to Green Bay. Thus, the Vikings completed a remarkable run through some of the strongest teams in the NFL, and their schedule eases up a bit in the second half. The Lions are still alive, however. They only trail Minnesota by a game, and in 2 weeks, these two teams meet again. Thus, Detroit can sustain the division race by beating the Vikings in their own backyard. But the way Minnesota has been playing this task may be an impossible one. At the halfway point in the season, it appears no team in the NFL can match the method and muscle of the Minnesota Vikings. Final score, Minnesota 30, Detroit 17.